Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Switched On. I'm your host, Ben Lamoureux, and I'm joined by an old favorite and a first-time guest. Welcome back, Alex.
Hey.
And welcome to the show, Humulos.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. So, Humulos may be a new voice to you guys on the show, but he's actually been contributing since the beginning as our video editor, so thank you for all your hard work.
It's super hard work, I know. Putting those images on top of the vocals is super difficult.
Yeah, I know it's not super taxing, but it saves me a lot of time. You know, I usually spend like my weekends editing the audio part of it, so it's nice to just have someone else to pitch in on the rest.
Oh, always.
I feel lazy now.
So recently, Nintendo Switch reached its second anniversary, and we've had a lot of other big stories to focus on, like Reggie's retirement and the Pokemon Direct. But now that the dust has settled from all of that, we can spend a little time reflecting on Switch's first 2 years, and then looking ahead to year 3. So we're not going to do a news segment this time, because there wasn't really that much news to go over. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right into this discussion segment. But first off, let's just do some quick impressions. 2 years in, how do you guys feel about Nintendo Switch?
So I'm all in on it. Like, I have to say, I was initially I wouldn't say skeptical when it first came out, but more so disappointed that it wouldn't be, a really big, powerful new system, something that would really bring Nintendo up to the current standards of what the other console manufacturers are in. And I was worried that was going to really limit what it would be able to achieve. But after seeing it in action, I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that the portability goes a long way and really made a difference for me in my everyday gaming. Like, just so many things about how I would normally play big, long-form games or just completely change in a really, really good way. So I'm all for it. I am absolutely all in on it at this point. I love it. I can't say I love it for every single type of game, because there are still certain games where I want to have that extra power in them, graphically, just what it can do, all that kind of thing. But for most other games, like, I definitely prefer them on the Switch.
Yeah, for sure. And Alex?
But the thing that I think I've enjoyed most is that not only have we gotten a good quantity of games, but all the heavy hitters that Nintendo seems to want to announce actually materialize within 1 or 2 years, which is really refreshing compared to some of the stuff that we've been seeing with other platforms, particularly PS4, where stuff will get announced and then it won't release for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, no kidding.
I would always make the joke when they introduced PlayStation's marketing tagline, "Greatness awaits," because it felt like you were just constantly awaiting the greatness. And Switch,
yeah, that was an unfortunate choice of words for them.
I don't get why more people don't go in on them for that. But Switch has just kind of been constantly delivering on the expectations that they're setting, and they're not making us wait too long before they get there, and that's been really great to see. And especially after Wii U and 3DS, neither of which I really feel like Nintendo ever really had that kind of momentum with. They certainly didn't set ambitious potential and then actually reach it with either of those systems.
Yeah, neither one had as strong of a launch year either, for sure.
Yeah, that definitely.
I feel like especially with the Wii U and to a lesser degree 3DS, like, they really just kind of used their fan base as a crutch, and were like, these are the games we know our fans will play, this is what we're targeting to. Whereas what I've seen on the Switch is that they really flip that around, and they are still catering to fans while also reaching out to a lot of other demographics as well, people who would normally be into other consoles and into PC gaming. They're putting stuff on there that they would enjoy too, which has been really cool.
Yeah, I agree with most of those points, and I think for me the big sticking point has really just been, despite all the ups and downs, and it still doesn't have maybe as much third-party support as you might want, because, like you said, Humulos, it's not the most powerful piece of hardware out there. But despite all that, through 2 years, I don't think I've ever gotten as much enjoyment out of a console as I have in my first 2 years of Switch, and I don't think I've bought as many games or spent as much time gaming. And, I've said on past podcasts that as I've gotten older, I find it really hard to just, sink myself into a game world and play for several hours in a row. I end up playing more, bite-sized chunks, which Switch is really conducive to, because you can take everything on the go, and a lot of games are kind of designed with that in mind. But at the same time, I found myself having longer play sessions on Switch. Recently, I've started playing Zelda again, Breath of the Wild, which I'll get into that a little more. But I'll start playing it at night and be like, yeah, I'll just play for like an hour, and then I'll wind down and go to bed. And then next thing I know, it's like 3 a.m. So, yeah, Switch has just been, for me, probably the most engaging and fun console through 2 years that I've ever owned.
I absolutely have to agree with you on that because, when you're a kid, you can spend a lot of time in games, you got a lot of free time, but the older you get, the more crap you get piled on. And I absolutely feel that, and I often feel like I don't have enough time to really get into the games I want. But lo and behold, Breath of the Wild, I have about 300 hours in that game. And that would be impossible with any other game. Most other games I love, I can get maybe like 80 out of. And that's over years of playing them. But I can play every day over lunch. I can play when I'm commuting. I can play just in so many places where I would normally be playing smaller portable titles, but instead I'm playing like fully fledged like games like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, and it's really given me the ability to just play a lot more than I would be able to otherwise.
Yeah, it really capitalized on that idea that Wii U had of, hey, if someone else needs to use the TV, no biggie, you can play on the portable unit. Except it's obviously just, way more user-friendly because, you can take it anywhere. You don't have to be, like, within 10 feet of the console or whatever. So, yeah, I frequently found myself just, like, hanging out with the roommate, watching TV while playing on the portable unit. And, that's just not a functionality that was really available with past consoles, unless you had, like, the PS4 plus Vita and did, that whole thing.
No, as someone who actively uses that sucks. Like, I hate that it sucks because it's really cool and like it has the added benefit if you can remote in from anywhere over the internet. But good heavens, the latency is just so bad to where it's not useful at all.
Yeah. So, 2-year anniversary. Why don't we go ahead and just start with the beginning and kind of talk a little bit about Switch's first year, and then we can, move on to how Nintendo has continued to sort of evolve the Switch experience over the past year, 2018, and then, what we think's going to happen in 2019, or what we're looking forward to in 2019 and beyond.
Switch is the first system I ever actually did a midnight launch for, which tells you a lot about not only where I'm at in life, but also like how excited I was for how it was kicking itself off with that big Zelda title. So, right from the get-go, I was in love with the thing. And I liked my Wii, and which I didn't get on launch day, and I liked my Wii U, and I liked my 3DS, but I was never like all about everything that was going on with those systems all the time. Whereas with Switch, there's not a whole lot that I would have changed about my first experiences with it.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. It sort of emulated Wii, where it had this really successful launch because it was bundled with like a big critically acclaimed Zelda title that would go on to be a top seller. But personally, I like Breath of the Wild a lot more than Twilight Princess.
Oh yeah, it's a game that everyone just keeps finding new reasons to talk about it, whereas Twilight Princess has sort of exhausted itself pretty quickly.
Yeah, that was one of the big things about Breath of the Wild early on, is it sort of reignited that experience of, like, being little kids on the playground in the pre-internet era and sort of gossiping about, what you discovered in the game, like what secrets or rumors you've heard, because, the world map was so big and the physics engine gave you so much freedom in that game that it was like people were just constantly experimenting and discovering new tricks and spreading them, and it was just this really cool experience where, despite being a single-player game, it had this really active community just communicating with each other, and it was almost a multiplayer experience just over social media.
I really feel like that game in particular, like, the Switch was cool enough on its own, right? Like, we know that now, but I really wonder if Zelda was not a launch title for it, if it would have done as good, and I feel like, no, it may not have, because we have the 3DS, and that's super popular now, like, or not as much as maybe it was a year or two ago, but it became a really successful system, but it started off as a really unsuccessful system because I believe everyone could agree on this, it just didn't really have good games in the first year. Like, it had a lot of remakes and it had a lot of smaller things, but didn't have anything to where you're like, I have to play that. Whereas with Breath of the Wild, it was on Wii U, but we know how many people had a Wii U. Well,
it was a game that people have been waiting for years.
Absolutely,
we certainly didn't have anything like that in the early lineups for either Wii U or 3DS.
Right, and so that was huge for the success of the Switch. And unlike the Wii, where yeah, we did have Twilight Princess like right when the Wii came out, but I really don't feel like Twilight Princess was being a system seller for the Wii because we all know what the most popular game on the Wii was, and that was just straight up Wii Sports. That's why people were buying a Wii. Whereas now we had a game that doesn't appeal to old folks and the tiniest of children that aren't playing it because it's cool that you can swing a racket. This was a game that was cool because it was a good game, because it was a really solid experience, and I think that got a lot of people to dip their toes in the water and really made people understand, hey, this is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also Switch had a higher price point, and unlike Wii Sports, Breath of the Wild wasn't, a free packaged-in game, so it was good enough, and the word of mouth was good enough that it was able to sell millions very quickly, despite sort of the high price point and not being able to just go in and get the free game. So, like, for me, I think starting with Zelda, it really kicked off 2017 with this feeling of Nintendo is back.
Yeah.
We've talked in the past about how a lot of their recent games kind of feel like they've gone back and figured out what made, those experiences so special when people fell in love with Nintendo in the 90s, and then they've injected some more, modern ideas and modern gameplay elements into it, and they found just this right balance of nostalgia and forward thinking to just put themselves back on the map after, Wii U failed so badly commercially. So, to fans, starting the year off with Zelda and then ending it with, Mario Odyssey, these are two games that are some of the highest selling and most critically acclaimed games in the history of their franchises. And that's no easy task because these are some of the biggest games, or the biggest game franchises ever. And then, I think that led to Nintendo also proving to developers that they were back as well, and to publishers. Because early on, I think there was a lot of hesitancy about whether or not people wanted to support Switch because of how poorly Wii U had sold. But, when people saw Breath of the Wild and Odyssey and just saw how Switch was flying off the shelves, I think 2017 just did a good job for Nintendo of winning back the support of fans and the support of publishers as well.
Yeah, part of the early story for me when I was looking at what was coming to Switch was that Nintendo has figured out that it's not just about making different games, which was sort of their mantra for years, basically since the GameCube era. It feels like it was also about making the best games that they could make, and not only that, but making games that were the kinds of games that people were craving. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, Skyward Sword was a very linear experience in a time when open world games were the big thing, and not only was that not a popular move, but that wasn't even really a move that was in sync with what Zelda fans were asking for and wanted at the time. So it's been nice to see them kind of take what fans want as their starting point and what fans think would make a good game, and then add their flavor on top of that core idea.
And then at the same time, they were still able to bust out a few surprises in 2017 as well. Like, nobody saw Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle coming, and that was just this fantastic gem. Like I said, they didn't have a lot of third-party support right out of the gate, but they managed to secure some exclusives and to find some good partners. And yeah, like, Rabbids was just a super fun, addictive experience that I don't think anyone could have anticipated. But Nintendo made the move to secure that exclusive with Ubisoft, and I think it paid off. The game sold, I think, over 2 million copies. So
that was one of the great things about that first year, is that there were two sides of what Nintendo was doing. They had games like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, which were games with really big appeal that everyone wanted. Everyone wanted those types of games. That's exactly what they wanted to play. No one wanted Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, but Nintendo knew to make it, to get the right people in charge of it, and to just have a project like that come to fruition, something that no one would ever think about wanting, and to still do that Nintendo thing where they just make cool, unique experiences that turn out to be just good games. And
highly polished, too.
Absolutely. And that was a great thing about that whole first year, is because that's what it was all about. You had your safe bets like Mario Kart, and then you had your completely off-the-wall stuff, and they doubled down on the stuff that was risky in the last generation, like Splatoon. They saw that was a gem and really went forward with it, and that's bigger than ever. So they really knew how to make that first year really count.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed with third parties in particular was that with past systems, it felt like third parties were just kind of throwing stuff at the system. But this time it really felt like they knew what they were doing, and they knew what kinds of games they needed to make for a Nintendo platform, and that's something we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, I think that was especially a problem on Wii U, where a lot of developers felt like they needed to put gamepad features in just because, it's the gimmick of the system, but they didn't really know, what they were supposed to do or how they could use it. So sometimes it, felt forced, or sometimes it was totally optional stuff that didn't really add anything. And yeah, whereas on Switch, it really feels like Nintendo is doing a better job of working with third parties to make sure they understand the audience that they're releasing for and the kind of experiences that are going to sell well on that platform.
And can I just say, on the subject of third parties, Nintendo obviously had a third-party problem since like the GameCube era, and even maybe the Nintendo 64 era, where it was just overlooked for the most part. And if you were to tell me that in 2017, a company like or a developer like Bethesda was going to start having games on a Nintendo console, I would have never believed you. I would have just said no, that they don't do that. They stay away from Nintendo. They're PC-centric. They'll go to some consoles. They don't go to Nintendo. So to see more developers coming back into it is phenomenal. It's giving a lot of people who can only be one console families the chance to play more games, and I don't know what drew those companies into it. I feel like Nintendo themselves had a lot to do with it, and a lot of lobbying, if you will, to get them to come over to them. But whatever they're doing, it's working.
Yeah, and it wasn't even just sort of like the games that you would immediately think make sense for Nintendo, like, Skyrim. It's similar enough to say Breath of the Wild that would make sense to bring that. But, I mean, who could have seen Doom and Wolfenstein coming to Switch?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was expecting or demanding them as titles to come in the first year, for sure.
In addition to Nintendo making great games and working with third parties to bring over good games, they've done, I think, a very good job of marketing them as well. We talked recently about how the current president, Shintaro Furukawa, kind of threw the marketing team under the bus recently at an investor meeting. I don't really agree with that. I think Switch's marketing has been pretty solid overall, but more importantly, it's just the fact that they've really invested in it. Because, I love Satoru Iwata, and, he did many great things for Nintendo, but he had some pretty big missteps as well. And I think one of them is that during the Wii U era, he said, on several occasions that he didn't really see the value in TV advertising. And so he had this great idea of Nintendo Directs, which were fantastic for word of mouth and energizing, the core base and everything. But I don't think he did enough to advertise beyond the core base, and, the sort of end result was that only the core base bought Wii U, and it didn't really have any support beyond that. So I think Kamishima, and now moving on to Shintaro Furukawa, they've both done a pretty good job of recognizing that, yeah, we need to reach out to the core base with these Nintendo Directs and really keep in touch with, the fans that know the brands the best. But we also have to get our name out there, We need to run ads. We need to attract games you might not necessarily expect on Switch, and we need to market those too. And we really need to expand this brand. We need Nintendo to be so much bigger than it was last generation.
Yeah, I don't think people really appreciate how much the marketing was front and center for Wii until you go back and think about it. Like, how many of those TV commercials do you remember? And how many TV commercials do you remember for 3DS and Wii U? Like, I don't really remember any.
Yeah. Honestly, the one I saw the most was a Yokai Watch commercial for 3DS.
Sure, because you watch a bunch of cartoons, I imagine.
Yeah.
And so that they would have popped up for you. But that's now we see cartoons in the places where we see advertisements in the places where adults are looking for their content. It's not just kids' content these days. I saw Nintendo Switch advertisements during sports events. I saw Nintendo Switch advertisements during, popular adult shows. That's not something I'm used to seeing.
Yeah, they had the Super Bowl commercial a few years back too, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I was also impressed by, from the get-go, how much they've been pushing young adults in their ads. From the very first video that we saw, the one that tons of people watched because it was really cool and it resonated with young adult people.
Is this with Karen and the rooftop party, or is this?
Yeah, the Karen rooftop party, the very, very first video. It reminded me of the Wii days in the sense that was a very memorable video introduction, and maybe not all the Switch commercials they've been putting out are all equally memorable. But if your first exposure to Switch is through a TV commercial, I imagine that you'll remember which one it was.
And I don't even watch any television whatsoever, or I never even see any kind of ads in most of my life. But the ones I have seen, I've noticed something big about the difference between the ones I'm seeing now and the ones I saw for the Wii U, and that's that they're marketing the right things. They're actually advertising elements that make sense to advertise. With the Wii U, the marketing was so bad that most people didn't even know it was a new system. They're just like, here, you can add a screen to your Wii. Okay, cool. But with the Switch, they're really showing, like, hey, here's the thing. You can put it in here. It shows up on the TV. You can play with your family. The controllers come right off. They're advertising what makes people want that kind of thing, as opposed to what they want people to want.
It does help that it's a good product that's very easy to advertise. It sort of sells itself. Whereas Wii U definitely did not sell itself.
No, yeah, that was an uphill struggle, like, the whole way through, is figuring out how to market.
I'm sure they didn't really know what to do with the product they were given for Wii U.
Which is annoying, because, like,
it did a lot of...
I was, like, the perfect person for it. It's like, all I want is a second screen on everything for my maps, but no one else wanted that, and, yeah.
Instead we get Star Fox with its weird forced angles.
I know!
Well, they never like, committed to anything, really. That made it harder, I think, to advertise because you didn't have a unifying story to tell about the games that they were putting out.
Yeah, Switch's message is a lot more clear and straightforward.
Because it doesn't matter what games you're putting out. Just any game you can play anywhere. Done.
Heck yeah. I mean, heck, I even play it in restaurants. Like, if me and my wife are just sitting at the table waiting for our food to come, we're like, okay, you want to play some Mario Party? Yeah, let's play some Mario Party. We just play Mario Party while we're waiting. We only need to bring the one system. We got both controllers ready to go. It's you really can just play it anywhere, which is super appealing for people with busy lives.
Yeah, I've said this on the podcast before, but it feels like they were anticipating a future that's a few years away where we'll be riding in self-driving cars more often. And
I am anticipating that greatly.
In theory, mass transit will be implemented in some places, not in the U.S. And people will play their Switches on their trains and all that. Like, it seems like they know that's a future that's coming in more places outside of Japan and maybe outside of Europe too.
Yeah, and going back to what we were talking about earlier, like, how did Nintendo manage to attract some of this third-party support that you wouldn't see coming? And I think a lot of it is that more and more we're seeing developers try to put AAA experiences on mobile phones. Or on tablets, and so Switch is kind of like the high end version of that. It still feels like like a dedicated console, but you can do sort of those mobile ports to it and everything. So it kind of seems like they're getting a jump on that market as well.
The word you just said there, I want to focus on that for a second. You just talked about ports, and that's one of the, and maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. I don't know. Stop me if I am, but. One of the biggest complaints for the Switch throughout the first year, and especially in the second year, but people were complaining the first year, is that it's a port system, that it didn't really have anything new, and that even like one of the biggest titles on there, Breath of the Wild, was a port of the Wii U version, and Skyrim was a port, and Doom was a port, and most of the other games that came out were ports, and I know it got a lot of flack for that, but I will say, I'm also happy it's a port system in a lot of ways.
Yeah, same. Especially because now that I have so much, I feel like Switch gives me so much more time to play games. It's like I'm going back and experiencing all these things that I either bought and never really played much, or never checked out when they first came out, but heard good things about them over the years. And I've accumulated quite a library of old games that have gotten ported and actually gotten through most of them.
And of course, you have to remember that nobody bought a Wii U, so criticizing Wii U ports is a little strange to me, just because it's like there were so many games on Wii U that had like an average rating of like 9 out of 10 on Metacritic, and there were these just fantastic experiences, but they only sold 1 or 2 million copies, and now they get re-released on Switch, and it's like week one they triple what they sold on Wii U's launch. So yeah, like when it comes to re-releasing Wii U games, I see absolutely no downside, especially since usually Nintendo is actually packaging in some extra content to kind of make it worth the, if you're going to rebuy it, to make it worth the rebuy. But for a lot of people, it's their first experience with it, and they're getting the best possible version. And then when it comes to third-party stuff, it's the added portability element. If you don't want the game on the go, then, whatever. You already have it on your PS4 or your Xbox or whatever. I see no reason to complain about Nintendo giving you the option to have that same experience but on the go.
I have to say, I was bitter in some cases. Mario Kart 8, I think, was the biggest one, where I'm just like, I seriously bought this game and all the DLC, and then now I got to buy it again for $60 if I want to keep it on a modern system. And I did have issues with that I've mostly gotten over, and I immediately I still ended up buying it fairly, not right when it came out, but fairly soon after, because we're going on a trip, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll be seeing my nephews. This will be fun to play with them. I wasn't thrilled to be buying that game again because it was expensive, but for the most part, I am still very happy with the number of games that, like you were saying, Lex, that I may already have in my library, but that I never got around to beating. And I'm able to have more time to get into those games. And good heavens, like, I've never beaten more games in my life than on the Switch. Like, that is insane to me, where I have so many unfinished games in my Steam library, but on the Switch, the only games I haven't finished are the games I don't like, and that's it.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of just the fault of Nintendo always being a little bit behind on online infrastructure. So it's taken them too long to figure out what they want to do with like accounts and, you know, whether your game is tied to a hardware or to an account or whatever. So yeah, there is, it would have been a lot more preferable if all the people who actually were loyal enough to Nintendo to buy Wii U and to invest in its games, if they could have gotten like a discount for upgrading to the Switch Deluxe version. But unfortunately, that was a case of Nintendo being just way behind the times on online accounts.
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of Nintendo figuring out accounts, I definitely I shouldn't say definitely. I almost most likely would have gone mostly digital on Switch had they had the account game sharing digital licensing mechanisms that they have now in place. Because, you know, had I known that I could download my games on multiple systems and log in on multiple systems and actually get my save data on multiple systems, like, there would have been no reason for me to feel like I had to buy physical to share games with my wife, who has her own system. Yeah.
So year one wasn't without hiccups. You know, there was no Nintendo Switch Online at launch, and then even when it did launch, it was pretty lukewarm reception. So Nintendo is still kind of figuring the online stuff out. Maybe if some of these Microsoft rumors are true, they'll get a little better at it soon. But yeah, so not without faults in 2017, but in terms of the software output and the marketing for it, they did a pretty good job. So moving on to 2018, then, you know, there was still a lot of really good games, and I had a ton of fun with Switch last year. But whereas 2017, the theme to me felt like Nintendo's back, 2018 kind of felt like Nintendo was coasting to me. And, you know, obviously that changed in the holiday season, which is arguably the most stacked holiday they've ever had with Mario Party and Pokemon Let's Go and Smash. But for the 9 months before that, there was relatively little in the way of exclusives.
Well, big exclusives. Let's just put that asterisk out
there.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's not that they didn't put out games. It's that they didn't put out games on the caliber of something like a Smash Bros. Or a Zelda or a Mario.
Sure. Yeah, well, like we had Mario Tennis Aces, and we got like the port of Captain Toad, and then there was Octopath Traveler, and there were some indie exclusives. But yeah, in terms of like system sellers, there really wasn't much for the first 9 months, and then that holiday season was just enormous.
And despite that, even though there weren't that many like big things happening on the Switch for those 9 months, I still saw mine getting as much use as I did the previous year, and I will say for me, that was because in 2017, indie developers specifically learned how valuable the Switch was for them, and then doubled down on it. And holy cow, like I'm a PC gamer mostly when I'm not playing on Nintendo, and that's where all my indie games were bought before. I bought every single one on Steam so I could play it, on whatever computer I'm on. But I've completely transitioned, and 2018 was the year that made me do that, because while in some cases I was still buying games that maybe weren't announced for Switch yet, but then I discovered every indie game gets announced for Switch. Every single freaking one that's worth playing. There's a few exceptions, of course, but at some point they all get announced. So now I'm just like, well, why not just make that my system? Because while some indie games may be more ambitious than others, for the most part they have less taxing needs for what their system can handle, and the Switch can handle most of those without issue. A game like Minute, for example, black and white 2D game, that needs like nothing. So it works out perfectly on the Switch, and you can play it anywhere. So games like Celeste were like freaking huge for me.
Oh my god, yes.
When that came out, and there were a bunch of others. I can't remember which ones released what year, but games like that. The Mummy Demastered, Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight was the beginning of 2018 as well. That's right. It came out in 2017 for everything else, but like I said, everything gets a Switch port when you're an indie developer. Undertale came out, and like so many things where it's just like, yeah, Switch is my absolute go-to indie system now because I can play them anywhere.
Yeah, so from a strategy standpoint, it was, I think, kind of a negative thing for Nintendo to go so long without major releases. But as a fan, I was still playing the big games from 2017, and then, like you said, there was just this constant flow of just really, really high quality, cheap indie experiences that also, don't take up too much space. So it was kind of a relief to me as a fan that I didn't have to always be looking forward to the next 50-hour adventure. I could just settle down and play Celeste or Undertale for a little while. And Nintendo really took advantage of the fact that Steam has become a steaming pile of garbage. It's impossible near impossible to find good indie games on Steam just because, they do such a poor job of managing and curating it that it's like hundreds and hundreds of things get uploaded every week, and a lot of them are just asset flips or just really, buggy, poorly programmed games that barely run. So it's hard to find the diamonds in the rough, which is too bad because there's been a ton of quality indie games lately.
Could you imagine if Golf Story released on Steam instead of Switch?
Oh yeah, I mean it would have been buried. Nobody would have played Golf Story on Steam. So yeah, Switch was able to take a lot of these good games and put them, right to the forefront, and the lack of a virtual console, as frustrating as it is, also made it a lot easier for these indie games to shine. And Nintendo, promoted a lot of them pretty heavily. So yeah, I never felt like I was without anything to play in 2018, despite the fact that you could argue there was sort of a game drought, because there was always indies, and the third-party support started to pick up a little bit, and, Nintendo brought some more of those old Wii U games to Switch with, added content. So yeah, I never really felt like I was going without in 2018.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually bought double the games in 2018 than I did in 2017. And part of that was because there's a lot of stuff in 2017 that I just didn't get around to. I had a policy for a while where anything that was $20 or more on the eShop I wouldn't buy unless it got a physical release. I'd wait about a year or so and see if that happened. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up coming back to a lot of those games in 2018. And then part of it also was because just the number of third-party games that were coming out on a weekly basis just shot right up right around the end of the year before. And so 2018 was just full of stuff that I wanted to play.
Yeah, because that was, I think, Doom and Wolfenstein, and was Skyrim 2017 or 2018?
Skyrim and Doom were 2017, and then Wolfenstein was 2018. Okay.
I don't know where I was going with that. Continue.
And 2018 ended up having some of my favorite games on the system, even compared to the stacked 2017. I actually like Hollow Knight more than Breath of the Wild. Shh, don't tell. I think a lot of games that I played in 2017 I really liked at the time, but as I get some distance from them, I don't really feel compelled to replay them. Like Mario Odyssey, for example, I really liked how creative it was, but it's not a game that I really see myself replaying a lot just because the collect-a-thon thing just doesn't really work for me on replays.
See, I've set Odyssey aside for the end of the generation just because the controls and the level design are so great. Like you said, the collect-a-thon thing can get a little old, but it just feels so good. Every level is a playground. So
yeah, messing around with it is still really cool.
Yeah, so I played the heck out of it when it launched, and now I'm just gonna let it sit in a corner somewhere and collect dust for 4 years. And when Switch gets toward the end of its life, my memory of it will have faded enough that I can go back into it. It'll be fairly fresh again, and I can just kind of experience that whole running around in the playground experience again.
Yeah. For me, I can totally see how someone would have the itch to replay Odyssey, but there were just so many more games in 2018 that feel like they are begging to be replayed. I could totally see myself playing through Octopath Traveler a second time and just doing it completely differently, maybe just grabbing 4 of the party members and trying to go through just with those and the limitations of how that will impact my play style. I can see myself... Undertale is a famous example of a replayable game that really wants you to replay it in different ways.
Yeah, for sure.
I haven't tried playing it in any of the other runs yet. I've just did the basic standard one, so I'm looking forward to picking that one up again. But part of it is a lot of RPGs came out in 2018, so that those games tend to be replayable if you know what you want out of them.
And they're also time sinks, so I can see why you didn't have much time to go back to Odyssey.
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked about 2018 is that Nintendo decided to do something that was super, very much Nintendo's thing to do, and that was the introduction of Labo. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm 30. I'm not the target audience for Labo, but when I saw it, I'm like, if I was 8 years old again, I would freaking love this. Like, I would have so much fun doing this. And sure enough, my nephew, like, who's big into building stuff, was super excited for it. And like, while I don't know what possessed them to try to do something that weird and outlandish, I still think it was a really cool move on their part just to really experiment, because that's something we lost with the Switch, is the zany experimenting that the Wii U and the Wii did, and trying weird new things. And not to say it's a bad thing that we lost it, because, it didn't always work, but I'm happy to see that they've found new ways to incorporate that Nintendo style into a system that's otherwise, purely seen as a normal gaming system that just happens to be portable. They're still making weird stuff with it. And I'm happy to see them continuing to do that. I want to see them continue to do that. I want Labo to be like a continuous thing. Again, not for my sake, but because I think that's a really, really fun idea for just any kid. It's just something they can put together and experiment with, which is awesome.
And the industry as a whole has become fairly risk adverse, so it's fun to see Nintendo like just experimenting a little bit. I'm in the same camp with you. I would never buy Labo myself, but when it was first announced, I saw a lot of parents with young children excited about it, or teachers who were thinking of ways they could maybe incorporate into like a lesson, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just always cool to see Nintendo like try something that nobody else would even dare to think of, and it doesn't always pan out, but you need that creativity in the market. You need somebody stirring the pot a little bit and trying new things.
Yeah, I see a lot of people talking about Labo like it was like some kind of total failure that Nintendo needs to move on from. But for me, I feel like the idea of a customizable modular controller interface that you can create yourself and that can take all these different shapes that a controller normally couldn't is just really cool to me. Like, a lot of people just look at the project angle and they don't realize how much potential this could have to make really cool traditional game experiences. I really liked, for example, when they took the gas pedal and steering wheel thing and made it an option in Mario Kart.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't actually used it, but the fact that that exists is really cool. It makes me wish they'd sell that configuration in an easier standalone package that isn't tied to the Labo software. Something that'd be a little more inexpensive for people to get. There's so many other ideas that I had swirling in my head too when I first saw it. Like, you could have all these different kinds of like sports equipment controllers that use Labo. You could have like a sword and a shield for games like Zelda. And I would love to see them try to pick up the concept and move it in more of that direction, where you, instead of buying like a $70 kit, you buy like a $20 accessory that makes your games play in a different and more engaging way.
Yeah, I think the price point is probably the biggest barrier to making Labo like actually sort of a mainstream success.
Yeah, it was sort of a weird thing to see because we were now in the age of digital distribution, so it seemed like it would have made sense for them to just have Labo as a free download, and then you just buy whatever cardboard packs you want to make. And that'd be probably cheaper for them to distribute and have on shelves, too.
Mm-hmm.
I did try out the variety kit, and I think the way that they ended up delivering is still pretty cool, but it just sucks that they didn't make it more accessible, I guess.
So then another big thing that came in 2018 was the launch of Nintendo Switch Online. So like I said earlier, a bit of a mixed reception. Personally, I want more offered with it, in particular like Super Nintendo and Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance games. And I think that's something they'll roll out eventually. I don't know why they're taking their sweet time so much.
For real, it's not hard to just load a ROM into an emulator, but
yeah.
it's...
Yeah, I thought for sure once we got to the 6-month period that they'd start adding more platforms just to try to keep the engagement going.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with them just trying to find the best possible way to roll it out, both in terms of public perception, keeping people hooked, and then also pricing models. But at the moment, like, I just want to play Super Nintendo. Like, I just want to play Earthbound on my Switch. But at the same time, like, it's by far cheaper than any of the other, online services. I have, like, the family plan, so that's $35 a year, and you can have 8 people on that. So I've just had, like, a bunch of friends just kind of, piggyback onto my account and just tell them, throw me $5 or whatever.
Ditto.
And it's like, yeah, I barely pay anything for a year of online. And so, yeah, and then it comes with the digital library of NES games, which is nice, and they've been adding some more to it every month. And then, well, I think this was 2019, but if we're talking about Nintendo Switch Online, we might as well mention this. They recently launched Tetris 99, which I think was a really cool idea and is hopefully indicative of more cool exclusives coming to the service going forward. So yeah, it's an okay foundation. I don't think it's enough, but at the price point, I'm certainly not complaining. But I hope this is something they just keep building on, especially with Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance games.
I definitely want to see them try harder when it comes to what they're doing with it, because I think that the initial idea of give them the Nintendo games, I think that's great, but they're excelling at it in some areas, but in some areas they're completely neglecting. For example, I think them doing the custom saves and marketing them as special versions of the games, I think that's cool. I think that's a really great idea. The special Legend of Zelda is neat for getting people a head start into it. There were some other cool ideas in there.
They did the Ridley one too, right before Ridley launched in Smash, which was kind of cool, little piece of history.
But at the same time, just using those that version of these NES games, comparing it to any other version, you can see that it's inferior in a lot of ways. Probably my biggest complaint is button remapping, aka the lack thereof. You have to stick with the A and B button exactly where they are. Using the Joy-Con by itself is impossible. Good heavens. Have you tried playing an NES game with the Joy-Con? It's bad.
I was a sucker and I bought the wireless NES controller, so I don't have that problem. I will give you a hack though. You can actually use the X button as the B button, and that's much more
absolutely it is. But then there's the problem with the select button and how that's
of course. Yeah.
So
no, you're not wrong.
I want to see them here's the thing. The best emulator Nintendo there's two. There's two emulators that Nintendo has released that were the best emulators they've ever done, and that's the Game Boy Advance emulator on the Wii U and the Super Nintendo emulator on the 3DS. Both of those were amazing, had great features, were absolutely solid experiences. I want to see more of that. I want to see a solid emulator to where I can turn it on and then not have to say, no, I'd rather play this on my computer, because it's much easier to play on that. I want it to be easier to play on the Switch than anywhere else. And that's what I want to see. But I will say my biggest positive about the way they're handling the NES. And it's not a positive they intended, but the fact that you can download the Famicom version of the NES app is phenomenal. I've enjoyed that thoroughly. I'm playing Zelda 2 on the Famicom version, the Famicom Disk System version right now for the first time ever. Good heavens, it's different. I did not expect it to be as different as it is. And I'm loving finding things like that out. So that I really enjoy. Again, they didn't intend for that to be a major thing about it, but it's been a major thing for me, being able to play the Japanese versions.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of just how different they are, so I might have to check that out a little bit.
From what I understand, one of the biggest differences is the way they sound.
Sound, absolutely. Gameplay-wise, leveling up in Zelda 2 is entirely different.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I can talk more about that later, since this is not a Zelda cast.
I should make my wife play it, because that's her favorite Zelda game.
Oh, nice.
And I would be really curious to see how she took to the game being different in any way.
Oh, yeah, she'll pick up on it, right away. Yeah.
Awesome. One thing that I was I don't get a lot of use out of this myself, but I was sort of surprised by how much my wife used it, was the ability to play the NES games online and pass the controller. She has another friend of hers for whom Zelda 2 is also their favorite game. And so the two of them have been passing back and forth and going through that game together. And it just reminds me of first sharing games with friends and family when I was growing up, and we wouldn't play games on our own. One of us would have the N64 and one of us had the Super Nintendo. So anytime we'd get a game, we'd all go through it together. It's nice that a company is not neglecting that in 2018, 2019. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very important experience to retain, and I'm glad that Nintendo is actually using the internet to retain it. That is not something that I would have necessarily expected them to embrace in any way at any point at any part of their history.
Yeah, Nintendo just using the internet in general is surprising.
Yeah, because it seemed like a no-brainer that they'd do that on Virtual Console too, but then they never did, and it took them, I don't know, how long is it? So it's 12 or 13 years before they finally actually embraced that.
Yeah, they're almost caught up to 2009. It's
mm-hmm. It's about time.
I will say with the online, there's been some good steps forward. I think that there's a lot of good potential here. I need to see them really fully embrace it. Like Mario Party, for example, the fact that that does not have an online party mode is insane to me. It's absolutely baffling, and I cannot understand why.
Yeah.
So they're definitely still learning. They're still trying to figure some things out. I think.
I wish they'd send signals that they were actually ramping stuff up, though, in certain areas.
Yeah, definitely. But
like you were talking about the emulators being kind of disappointing. Like that's something that they could fix on an emulator-wide basis now that everything's running through one app, and we just don't see any indication that they're working on that at all.
The nice thing is, though, is they are at least trying to be somewhat transparent in other ways. Like thinking about the Metroid thing, thinking about they're giving us a lot more information about these things more thoroughly, more in advance. They're definitely doing a good job of explaining themselves in a lot of ways. Again, still areas to improve, but I think that kind of goes back to the difference between the Wii U and its marketing and its support to why the Switch is doing so much better, and it's because it's easier to understand a lot of what's going on with the Switch than it is with the Wii U.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Mario Party, that kicked off a just super packed holiday season where we had Mario Party in October, which was like the highest rated Mario Party game since the first one, and then we had Pokemon Let's Go in November, and that sold 10 million copies in about 6 weeks, and then in December we had Smash Bros, which sold 12 million copies in like 3 weeks. So was this maybe like the biggest Nintendo holiday season ever? I can't off the top of my head think of a better one, but maybe if I went back and actually checked every single October through December window, I might find one better. But to me, in recent memory, I can't think of anything that just matched that magnitude of 3 big titles that were all critically acclaimed and all sold really well.
Well, I mean, you could argue that the Wii was a better holiday just because of how many more people it killed, allegedly. Just trampling over each other to gather it. But no, as far as like actual game content goes, no, I completely agree. I haven't seen a holiday window like this in a long time, and it definitely kept me busy. Smash kept me busy all of December, and for when I didn't have anyone around to play with, I was playing Katamari, which all of you should go buy right now because I want the sequel to be on Switch too, please.
Oh, I absolutely bought it day one.
Yes.
With that exact thought in mind that I want the sequel.
Heck yeah.
I'm the odd one out then.
Yeah. That's the funny thing about Katamari fans is every single one of them is like, oh, I love Katamari, but We Love Katamari is so much better. So just go buy it, everyone, please, especially you, Ben. But for real, like Smash was huge.
That was the secret fourth big holiday game that people should have paid more attention to.
The most important one.
Yeah.
I mean, it contains all the others in the giant ball of love and friendship.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I really liked all 3 of those games. Mario Party was very much the kind of Mario Party that I was hoping Nintendo would go back to after the last few that I completely skipped because they just didn't look appealing. I've used to not really care about the other game modes in Mario Party games. I would just stick to the board game and maybe occasionally that weird like battle thing in Mario Party 3. But in this one I've found that I've been playing the co-op river scramble or whatever it's called a lot because we're fighting with each other less. My friends and I are very cutthroat about certain games where we're competitive, and it's nice to be able to cooperate for a change.
Mario Party just brings out the most violent in people.
The best worst in you. It still can get contentious because you really do have to cooperate, and some of us do not have as good attention spans as others, I guess would be a gentle way of putting it. But that's been fun. What did you guys think of Mario Party?
Oh, good heavens, I love it. Like, Mario Party 2 has been my go-to Mario Party ever since it came out. Like, it's the only one I'll play and not... Well, no, okay, I'll still get upset. But I won't get as upset playing it just from everything that happens. Because I did play... I either played 9 or 10. I'm not sure which one it was. My sister bought it and had us try it, and just none of us liked it at all. But I really like the different dice that you can use in Super Mario Party. I like that they're mixing up with that. I love the co-op boards. Like, I love doing that, which unfortunately I'm the only one amongst the people I normally play with who do love the co-op boards, but
I haven't tried the co-op version of the. Yeah, I haven't tried that yet.
yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's a very different type of experience, and I like it. It plays right. It feels like a good Mario Party game overall. It just feels exactly like what Mario Party is supposed to be, and I wouldn't say it's like necessarily huge new improvements everywhere, but it's just enough small improvements to where it just makes it really fun.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is lacking is it needed maybe one or two more boards.
Yeah.
And that's something they could do DLC for, but they just haven't telegraphed anything like
Which
that
I'm
yet.
very surprised about. Like, Mario Tennis Aces is getting, like, new content every other day, and I don't know, maybe it's way more popular than I expected it was, but...
With the profile that a Mario Party game gets, you'd think that they'd want to keep it in the spotlight for as long as they could, and they just don't seem to be putting in the work.
I'm expecting that it will happen, because that was actually one of the things that Furukawa mentioned when he kind of, threw the marketing team under the bus, is that he said, we need to do a better job of marketing Mario Party, Pokemon Go, and Smash Bros. Or Pokemon Let's Go. And since then, they've actually put out like a bunch of Pokemon Let's Go commercials recently, even though it launched back in November. I haven't seen as much for Mario Party. I think it got some new commercials in Japan, maybe. So yeah, I think there's still a good chance that we see more content released for that, because they don't feel that their work is done. They don't feel like that they've fully tapped the potential of that game and their holiday lineup in general. But yeah, that was my biggest complaint. Not enough boards. And I would especially like some bigger boards. The smaller boards were fine for, kind of quicker, more concise matches. But I would also like some big sprawling boards where I can play 40 turns and waste the whole weekend with friends.
That's one of those things where I get why they prioritize smaller ones, because the idea is that it can be played portably, but it doesn't hurt anyone to also have bigger boards, because you won't always be playing portably.
Exactly. The Nintendo is usually doing a pretty good job of keeping in mind that Switch has to appeal to both, their 3DS audience and their Wii/Wii U audience. They need to make experiences that cater to the TV and the portable play. So I think we'll see more. It's been a little while and they haven't said anything yet, so I agree that is a little strange. But given Furukawa's recent comments, I think they understand that their job is not finished there yet.
Yeah, and on the opposite side of things, I really like how with Smash, they really showed a really good understanding of how the DLC should be handled with that, on the subject of DLC, that is, because they just show right up front. It's like, hey, this is how much DLC we're doing, this is what we've got planned, we're going to have 5 characters with 5 stages and some music, it's this much money, I'm sorry if you don't want to buy it beforehand. They actually apologized pretty much for that, trying to be like, I'm sorry we can't tell you anything about it, so don't buy it unless you think it's going to be worth it.
I was kind of surprised we didn't get the microtransaction cosmetic stuff like we did last time. I guess it makes sense because it's the Ultimate Smash Bros. And so a lot of that stuff was already created for the last one, and they might as well just throw it in. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
given the profile of that game and how much they know people will spend on it, it surprised me that they didn't.
They even have 2 types of currency, and they're not charging for it.
Yeah.
I will say, I didn't play Let's Go at all, so I can't really speak for that, but between Smash and between Mario Party, I had my multiplayer stuff down for the rest of the year. I've had 3 Smash parties at my house since that came out, and good heavens, I never wanted to buy another dock for my system because I thought that it's way too expensive, and it is. I don't think it's way too expensive. It is way too expensive for a freaking HDMI adapter, But
how nice is it when you've got it?
Yes,
right?
Because I keep one at my office. And so at any point, I've got 2 coworkers who are pretty much on par with me for Smash, so we have great matches with each other. And then several other coworkers who would like to join in too. And so, over lunch or after work sometimes, I just bust out my dock that I keep in my desk, and then I'm ready to go for Smash, whenever the heck I want. And I don't know. You wouldn't think of Smash as being one of the games that would get a lot of benefit out of portability, because you don't plan on playing it in portable mode, but because you can take your Switch everywhere and have the docks in other places, it still benefits from that portable aspect.
Yeah, I went to a Smash LAN tournament recently, and I forgot just how much people would lug around TVs and GameCubes to play Melee places, and you don't have to do that anymore, and it's great.
Yeah, I had this experience where I went to a tournament with some friends, And one of my buddies doesn't actually own a Switch yet. So while everyone else was setting up the main Switch for the tournament, I just brought mine in portable mode, and he just kind of nudged me and was like, "Hey, you mind if I go into the other room and practice for a little bit so I'm not rusty in this tournament?" It's like, "Yeah, sure." So I just set it up into like the tabletop mode and handed him a Pro controller, and he was good to go. So on the subject of Pokemon, then, that was the other big holiday game. I felt like it did a really good job of striking that right balance between traditional gameplay and gameplay that's more similar to Pokemon Go to try to attract, the nearly 1 billion people that have downloaded the game, like, on mobile. And, at the same time, setting it in Kanto was able to sort of continue that trend of Nintendo has of reaching out to, like, the 90s fans who fell in love with Nintendo in the 90s and then maybe have moved on since then. But I will say, I think they hampered the potential for that game a little bit by the high price point of Switch, because if people are playing on phones, if they're playing Pokemon Go on mobile, then they don't have to pay anything for that. There's microtransactions, but so it's a big ask to go from a free Pokemon experience to an experience that between the console and the game is going to cost you $360. So I still expect a Switch Lite or a portable only Switch at a cheaper price point, maybe in the neighborhood of $200. I think that might come this year. But not having that in time for Pokemon in 2018, I think, limited the number of people that are hooked on Pokemon Go and are willing to then make that transition to Switch. So maybe we'll see that next year. And it sold 10 million copies, like I said before. So
I was going to say, the great thing is it's still cleaned up. It's not like it's going to stop existing either. So like whenever they're ready to release that cheaper entry, they're still going to have Pokemon Let's Go. And maybe even a sequel.
That's something we've talked about a little bit before, is that more than like any other Nintendo console, Switch has evergreen titles. Mario Kart, Zelda, Mario, Pokemon, they all continue to sell just really, really well on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild has like never dropped out of the top 20 in Japan, and I only dropped out I think once in the Americas in NPD in the US.
And yeah, as a result of that, like Nintendo just had like one of their best Januaries ever of all time, just because people are, even though there wasn't really that much in terms of new content, people are still picking up a Switch for Mario and Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart and Pokemon. So yeah, it's already at 10 million. It could easily still get to like 15 million, I would say, by the end of this year if they continue marketing it, and if possibly they release a cheaper Switch. But then of course they also have another Pokemon game coming out.
I will say I'm very interested to see how Nintendo changes their tune about the Switch this year, because the main draw of it is that, it's a console and it's a portable system. With Pokemon Let's Go, and more so with the Gen 8 Pokemon Sword and Shield, that's what they are, they're really going to have to change that philosophy a bit. Like you said, that's why they may be coming out with a cheaper model. And so I'm just wondering if they're how they're going to transition to that. If they are going to double down and say, this is a thing that everyone in the family should have one of. Because right now, like they've said, they don't view it that way. They view the Switch as a one per family system. But me and Jessica, we've played Pokemon X and Y together when it came out on each of our 3DSs. We played Sun and Moon together. We played the Gen 3 remakes together. We currently can't play the two Pokemon games at the same time because, we don't have those two Switches, and we bought it with the expectation that it would be a one per family system. So I'm interested to see what they do about that, both in terms of if they make a smaller model and how much it would cost and what it would lack from the regular model, and also in if Nintendo would double down on that idea that everyone needs a Switch instead of not everyone needs a Switch.
So there's actually been some recent comments on that. Junichi Masuda, has directed or produced most of the Pokemon games. He said he's basically treating Sword and Shield as if Switch is one per person. And this was before the names had been unveiled. This is still when it was just, Mystery 2019 Core RPG Pokemon game. But yeah, he said he's approaching it like he would, past handheld Pokemon games. And then Furukawa, in a recent shareholders meeting, he brought up the whole, we're one per household. And, he said it's going to be a while before they can get to that one per person, sort of setup, but that their goal in 2019 is to start getting multiple Switches in households. So maybe not everyone in your household has a Switch, but they really want to push the idea that, you should have like at least two Switches in your house. So Nintendo's starting to make that a priority, and again, I think that will probably lead to a cheaper entry point in some way or another. They've denied any plans for a price cut, but it could still happen. Nintendo denied the 3DS XL like a week before
Right.
it was announced. So there could be a price cut. There could be a smaller, cheaper model. There could be both.
Well, we have one example of that already, right? We have one example of an attempt to get the Switch into one home with the version that they released in Japan, where it's the same exact thing, but it's missing the dock, right? Like, it's just being sold without a dock.
Yep, yeah, you can just buy a Switch without the dock, and then they knock off, I think, the yen equivalent of about $50 off the price, so it's like $250 instead of $300.
The dock is $90, but take off $50, that's fine, but whatever.
Nintendo math.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the signs that 2019 is going to be a year where they move in that direction of the one Switch per person is not just Pokemon, but also Animal Crossing.
Yes.
It's a game that hasn't historically had a lot of like simultaneous play on one system features. It's really about each player having their own sort of screen and then walking into the other person's screen. And so that's like a big one. I don't know if since Pokemon's coming at the end of the year, I don't know if they introduce a cheaper Switch model with a game like Animal Crossing or wait till Pokemon comes out, but that definitely falls into that category of a game that they want each person to have a
Now,
system
Lex, you
for.
said that you and your wife both own your own Switch, right?
We do.
Okay, so let's say that you only had one. Do you think that you or your wife would be willing to get the cheaper Switch knowing that it would be like inferior in some way? Or would you still want to spring for a full-fledged one?
It really depends on what makes it inferior. My wife doesn't really play in handheld mode much at all, and so I could see her not really caring whether it was a little bit inferior. It just depends. If it didn't have easy dockability, that would be a big problem, I think, for her, because she plays Splatoon a lot, and she really just likes to use the Pro Controller. So that would be a deal breaker for her. For me, I am happy with the premium Switch that we have now. I don't think I'd want to go for a light model. I'd definitely go for a Pro model.
Gosh, yes, please.
That doesn't seem like it's in the cards for this year. It helps for me that I don't think Switch is really that inconvenient to carry around. I know for a lot of people, they're like, oh, I can't fit it in my pocket, so it's not portable. But I don't feel that way about it. I don't. I carry
Is that
it back
because
with
you
me
have
most
the
places.
Sheikah Slate from your midnight launch?
I did have the Sheikah Slate, and then I decided that was a little that case was a little too bulky, so I got a little soft case instead, and that's perfect. And I super don't mind throwing that in my bag and lugging it around.
So, while we're talking about Pokemon and Animal Crossing and potential new models, that seems like a pretty good time to transition into 2019. You know, what's happened so far this year and what we are sort of anticipating for the rest of the year. So for me, like I said, 2017, the theme was kind of Nintendo's back. 2018 was kind of Nintendo's coasting until the holiday season where they just drop a nuke. And for 2019, to me, this looks like the year that Switch really hits its stride. So I think they're going to have more steady first-party and exclusive releases. They've already got enough announced that, they can drop, on average, about one major exclusive a month. And we haven't even hit E3 yet, which could have, way more. Who knows what they'll show at E3. And, third-party support has continued to pick up and everything. So I think this could be the year that Nintendo Switch really feels like a matured system in its stride that's, kind of batting 1,000, having something for everyone and having regular content, no droughts.
One thing that I'd really like to see is something that they haven't really done as well with their past systems, which is actually following up the things that people really loved about their early lineup with sequels in a timely manner. That doesn't necessarily mean stuff gets released this year, like a Breath of the Wild sequel or Mario Odyssey sequel, but I want to know that those things are going to exist.
Sure.
And I want to know that they're going to exist soon. I don't want to be wondering whether they're going to exist. Because it feels like the only time that they've really done that well in the last couple generations was Mario Galaxy 2. That was the only real sequel to a really great game on a system that got a decent follow-up. Zelda, Skyward Sword, I liked Skyward Sword for what it was, but that was definitely not a follow-up to Twilight Princess and in terms of hitting the same kinds of appeal. Wii U obviously never actually got a Zelda game that it could follow up. Never followed up 3D World, never followed up Mario Kart. Those are all one-hit are one shot franchises on those systems. So I want to see signs that we'll get sequels on Switch.
And on multiple occasions, Nintendo basically said that they underestimated the workload of developing in HD for the first time, and so they had to keep delaying things. And I don't know if they had maybe planned to be able to have like a big game early on and then a sequel to it later in life, but they definitely ran into pipeline issues that made that near impossible. And we've seen some delays on Switch as well, but just based on the 2019 lineup, I think their pipeline is a lot better than it was for Wii U, and I can't remember a year in recent history where they had this many games, this many exclusives announced for the year already in like February and March. Yeah. And that's even with Metroid Prime getting delayed to roughly 2040 or whatever.
Yeah.
Despite all of that, they still have quite the lineup, and there's plenty of games announced that presumably aren't coming in 2019 but could in 2020, like Bayonetta 3, for example.
I think there's definitely a lot of good stuff to look forward to. For me, I feel like it's going to be a little bit like 2018, but that's just me personally, because a lot of the games coming out aren't the ones that really appeal to me. Like, my biggest things, I just like big adventure games or games like Mario where you're just running around exploring. That's what I'm really into, and I don't really think we have any of those coming out this year. Not that I can think of. Luigi's Mansion 3 might be the closest thing, if you can even consider that. But
maybe a little bit Pokemon, but it's not going to be like a big open world.
It's like a different. It's a different. It's a different pace too.
Yeah. And RPGs in general, like I'll play them, but I won't get like into them, like I will with other types of games. So, even then though, like I'm still happy with the things that are coming. Like I'm super excited for Link's Awakening. I love the look. I'm really glad that's a thing they're doing. I'm glad that the rumors from like 1,000 years ago turned out to be true.
Finally.
Yes. I'm very excited about that. Animal Crossing may not really be my thing really a lot, but I also kind of really like playing it. So, I don't know. I might still pick it up even though I know I'll get bored of it after a week, but we'll see.
I'm in the same camp. I've never been able to really get into Animal Crossing, but it's like, I've loved just about everything on Switch. So it kind of depends on if I find myself like needing a good relaxing time waster game.
Yeah,
so.
And it's fun for that. Like, it absolutely is. But I think my biggest like surprise this year so far has been Astral Chain. Not necessarily the fact that like, oh, a new game, whatever, but more so that it's something I saw where I immediately like, I like how that looks and I want it. So I was very happy to see that get announced. I am looking forward to giving it a shot. Platinum, they've got a solid track record, so even if it's not like great, it'll still probably be at least good. And if nothing else, it looks beautiful. I love the way it looks. I love that freaking all the blues they went with and all that. So there's a lot for me to look forward to. There's not anything I would say that's huge, but there's enough to where I know I'll keep busy.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat where it's not like a Smash Bros or a Zelda. There's no game that's like a 10 on my hype level, but there's a lot of games that I'm looking forward to and that I know I'll get, and there's a lot of games that I know other people are going to be super hyped for. Like, I'm not a big Fire Emblem guy, but I know that's going to be a big system seller in Japan, and it's not as big in the West, but it's been getting bigger and bigger with every release. And Animal Crossing, that's another one. That's going to be a system seller everywhere. And it's one that I'm not necessarily sold on. I might pick it up. We'll see what kind of gameplay features they show off, and we'll see how bored I get like over the summer or the fall or whatever. But there's plenty of steady releases, so that basically no matter what type of fan you are, there's probably going to be something this year that you're fairly hyped for. And then I think if this is even possible, I think people are underestimating the selling power that Pokemon will have this holiday season.
Oh, yeah.
Because, we already had a Pokemon game last holiday, but it was a very non-traditional Pokemon game. I think once it came out and the word of mouth started going around, people started to realize just how fun it was. But ahead of the launch, there was, a decent amount of negativity from people saying, get that mobile gameplay out of my Switch, So I think there's going to be a lot of people that are core Pokemon fans that didn't buy Let's Go that will buy Sword and Shield and might, buy a Switch for Sword and Shield. And I also think the Detective Pikachu movie, well, A, it's going to make over $1 billion in the box office, and B, it's going to bring in some new fans. Like, if Nintendo is, continuing to be wise with their marketing, they will put a Pokemon Sword and Shield trailer in every movie theater that plays Detective Pikachu across the whole world, and then they will continue to push the game at E3 and to air commercials just, in theaters and on cartoons and so on and so forth. I think this has a very big chance of growing the Pokemon audience. Let's Go had a chance at that, but like I said, it was sort of non-traditional, and there was no low price point of entry. But if Nintendo markets the heck out of Sword and Shield, especially in conjunction with Detective Pikachu, I think they can really drive holiday sales this year with that. And personally, I'm very excited for it. It's probably the game that I'm most excited for on Switch this year.
What about you, Lex? Which one are you the most excited for?
Oh, it's funny because I'm kind of my hype for things that are coming is kind of muted for the most part. Like I want to get the Final Fantasy ports, but I've played them a bunch of times already. I want to get Mario Maker 2, but then I enjoyed playing Mario Maker, but I didn't really get that into the creation side of it. But it's still really wacky, and so I'm looking forward to that. I want to get Crash Team Racing when that comes out. That's an example of a kind of game that I wish we'd see more, which is a Western style AA, I guess, game. We don't see a ton of those from Western publishers right now. Obviously, they can't port their AAA stuff when that's mostly where their focus is. But if we can see more Western styled stuff on Switch, that would be really great. Because a lot of the stuff we're getting is Japanese, and I like Japanese games. It's that's just a small slice of what's out there, and so Switch needs that broad global diversity.
What are you talking about? We're getting the 10 frame per second version of Assassin's Creed 3. Aren't you excited for that?
Oh God, that was one of those things where it's I bought that on Wii U, and it's okay, great, Ubisoft, can you give me another Assassin's Creed game that isn't from that era of Assassin's Creed? Give me a two collection. That's what I really want. Yeah. Yeah, Western publishers pick up the slack.
Or, Nintendo pick up the slack of reaching out to Western publishers and securing those deals.
Or buying Western studios.
Yeah. And, I think Nintendo's in this really unique position in 2019 where, so many publishers have pulled out of E3. Sony won't have a press conference. EA won't have a press conference. So, I think they have the ability to make a huge splash, whether that's showing off new hardware or showing off a game that people weren't expecting or both. But beyond that, Sony and Microsoft are both almost completely focused on the next gen, right? There's Sony canceled PlayStation Experience and E3 because they have nothing to show. And, Microsoft is buying up studios left and right, but, those companies aren't going to really have things ready to go, in the next 6 to 18 months, right? They're going to be building stuff for the launch of the next Xbox. So, and the next Xbox and next PlayStation are probably not coming until holiday 2020. So Nintendo's in this unique place where they have about a year and a half with virtually no competition because Sony and Microsoft are just so focused on making sure that they start next generation off with a bang that they don't really have much left to offer this generation. So, like I said, Nintendo is just hitting its stride, and Sony and Microsoft are tapering off and, reaching the end of their life cycle. So now is the time for Nintendo to really strike while the iron is hot.
Well, plus, Microsoft may not even be competition in the very near future.
Yeah, they might be all buddy-buddy with Nintendo. So.
Yeah, if these rumors pan out.
That's one sort of cool thing about the stuff that's coming out this year is a lot of it is not, outside of Pokemon, a lot of it's not super high impact, or it wouldn't be super high impact in a normal year, but in a year where Nintendo pretty much has the floor to themselves, there's a lot of stuff that could get attention that it wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah, like Astral Chain, I think, is a game that...
like Astral Chain?
Yeah, it'll appeal to Sony and Xbox players, and, they might be compelled to go out and buy a Switch for that sort of... it has a very PlayStation feel to me. I think a lot of Platinum games do, and so that might be a game that converts a bored PlayStation owner waiting for the PS5 to pick up a Switch in the meantime.
Does PlayStation feel mean anime characters to you?
That's part of it, and futuristic aesthetic is another thing, and hack and slash gameplay is another big one. Those are all things that you tend to find a lot of those experiences on PlayStation, where Xbox tends to be a little more geared towards the mature shooters and stuff. And obviously both both consoles have a lot of that. They've become more and more similar over the years, I think. But Xbox definitely does not have nearly as much of that anime vibe as PlayStation does.
Well, yeah, no, they're very Western for the most part. Well, which they're centered in America, so of course they're going to be more Western. But yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I realized I never answered that question, which is what am I looking forward to most? And that's probably Link's Awakening, predictably, I guess, since that's like one of my top Zelda games of all time. It's not really what I wanted out of a 2D Zelda game on Switch. Like, I really wanted to see what they could do differently with a 2D Zelda on Switch, and this obviously is hewing very closely to the original Link's Awakening in a lot of ways. And so I won't get the chance to see that just yet. But it's a really cool first look at what a 2D Zelda could be and could look like.
So we haven't covered it on Gamnesia just because I haven't been able to find any like corroborating info. But there was a rumor that there's another 2D Zelda in the works from Nintendo,
yes.
like a cheaper one that might be sort of eShop exclusive. And the rumor came from a guy who accurately leaked some Smash characters, when the last few characters were being trickled out before the games launched. So he pretty accurately predicted some of that, but then he also got some other things wrong, so his track record's been a little iffy, and I was kind of looking for, corroborating info. But yeah, there's at least one person who has some sort of connections that's saying we're getting another 2D Zelda, and Nintendo just hasn't unveiled it yet. And I think he even said 2019. So
it said before Link's Awakening, I believe.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I wasn't sure what to make of that rumor was we've also had rumors for a long time that there's going to be a mobile Zelda game, and I don't think this particular rumor specified that this was going to be a 2D Zelda game on Switch. It just specified that there's going to be a 2D Zelda this year.
Interesting.
And so, I wonder if that's the 2D Zelda mobile game, and if so, what form is that going to take? Because that could be a whole bunch of things. Who knows?
I could. I will say, I personally am hoping that A, it will be on Switch, and B, that it's going to be a Four Swords title. Even if it's just a rehash.
I'm not as enamored with the Four Swords games.
No?
But that's just me. I mean, they're fun, but they're fun every once in a while. They're not the kinds of games I just.
I can agree with that, which is it'll be cheaper. It'll be not a full-fledged expensive release. So it's the type of game where you can justify that even if it's not your main Zelda thing. It's but it would be fun to play with friends, so let's try it out. Because I think about the one Zelda game that has not seen a re-release ever on anything, and that's Four Swords Adventures. So of course it can't because of the stupid screens and all that. But if everyone's got 4 Switches, that would be you could absolutely translate that because they're doing Crystal Chronicles, of course. So that was almost exactly the same type of game as Four Swords Adventure as far as the connectivity part went. So I'd love to see that. I'd love to see Four Swords Adventures come out as that secret other 2D Zelda game. But that's just me being kind of super hopeful and optimistic, and it probably won't happen. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never say no to Nintendo bringing their back catalog forward because not only, is that good for game preservation, but, it's just really cool to play these games again on Switch.
So, speaking of rumors, data miners have been doing a little digging, and they're pretty sure that Smash Ultimate is going to be getting the home run contest mode and the stage builder. So we got the big 3.0 update launching in April. They're not, for sure that that's when they're going to drop, but it seems likely given the timing, of when this stuff sort of entered the code of Smash Bros. So there's a pretty good chance that, next month we'll get some free DLC for Smash that's going to add some pretty important modes, I think, that a lot of people have been missing. And I think that's, Smash Ultimate's really great, but one of the complaints that there's been is that, some fan favorite modes from the past were not included. So hopefully that's rectified soon.
I hope so. I got to get my Smash Get Ball on again. I miss playing that.
This is why Sakurai has been coming to work with his IV drip.
Oh man, that's so heartbreaking.
So he can make home run contest.
Yeah. I hope they. I will say, I hope they do continue to make good updates like that with Smash, especially because there's still some stuff that I think absolutely needs to be fixed, especially online. Arenas are still a pain in a lot of ways. Just I don't know. Maybe I don't know if you guys play Smash online as much as I do, but
not super often.
Okay,
usually with friends.
I play it twice a week, and it's just so annoying because it's if you want to change your character, you get out of the queue entirely, and you gotta wait to get back in. And when I'm streaming, oh my goodness, it's awful because if they start the match without you while you're choosing your character, bam, you don't get to like show anything. Like you're not spectating anymore. You're just out of it entirely. So I hope they do some more good updates to that. I think Stage Builder and Home Run Contest, well, Home Run Contest I probably won't care about at all. I never have. It's not my thing. Stage Builder I will have fun with. I think that'll be fun. So I'm glad to see they're still giving that some love, especially if it is just free DLC, like it almost definitely will be. So that's really, I'm glad to see them doing that.
Speaking of stage building, we've talked about this in past episodes, but I'm really hyped for Super Mario Maker 2. So other than Pokemon, that's probably the game I'm most hyped for this year.
Did you like scream audibly when you saw the slopes happen? Because I absolutely did. Like
I didn't scream, but I was definitely pretty excited.
Oh, I love that they started it off with that, because it's like, you know, the number one thing we were all clamoring for in the first Mario Maker is, when are they adding slopes? And it sounds like such a like stupid thing to get worked up over, but it makes differences in Mario games.
Yeah, and the way that they kicked the trailer off with that front and center for the first 15 seconds, it was basically like a way of them saying, yeah, we heard you, we're listening to the fans, and that's a good message to get from Nintendo. Anytime they reinforce the idea that, yes, we are listening and we want to release the content that you're clamoring for.
Unless it's Mother 3.
Yeah.
Well, and everyone was focusing on the slopes, but I felt that way about the entire trailer. Like, they were really leaning into the right stuff about Mario Maker 1 that I really loved, which is just the completely crazy stuff that they would never put into a normal Mario game, like hop in a clown car and shoot fireballs at things, or have a bunch of Bowsers with tails and shooting magic at you. Like, I don't know, there's so many things that are just completely off the wall that you can do in Mario Maker, and that's the stuff that I love most.
Yeah, it made everyone who bought the new Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, whatever, it made them all feel pretty not great after that, because it's like, oh, we could have had this.
Yeah, right.
That's the thing, is like, I don't know, I don't get why they went with New Super Mario Bros. Instead of New Super Mario World, because like, if they were going to make Mario Maker, like, why not just let us make our own Mario? We obviously love doing it. Give us the game where it's much harder to make a making system for. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we'll get both, but it is a little weird that they released the 2D Mario right before announcing that, oh yeah, now you can make your own 2D Mario. That's one of the few marketing missteps, I would say, we've seen from Nintendo this generation.
Yeah.
It does also kind of feel like stalling for a truly new full 2D Mario game. I think a lot of people want to see that too, not just Mario Maker. Not that people don't want to see Mario Maker. So I hope that they're not kicking that can too far down the road because they're making Mario Maker. But it's still a good stopgap, so I'm not going to complain too much.
I think stopgap is a beautiful word to use for a lot of things happening this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about, Nintendo being the only ones to come up with a zany idea like Labo. And they're reviving that this year with the virtual reality Labo kit that they just announced. So what do you guys think about that? I mean,
I really want to be.
Have any thoughts from that brief look we got at it?
I mean, my thoughts are pretty simple on it. It's not what everyone wants it to be, and that's where my thoughts pretty much end. Because I think it's going to be cool for the fun little experiences they're coming up with for it. But just like how Lex, you were talking earlier, you want to see more incorporation into full game experiences. I don't think we're going to get that a lot with the VR. Maybe at some point in the future, but yeah.
You can't just wear the headset. You have to hold it up to your face, so that really limits what you can do with it in a game. That's the thing that baffles me most about it, because that seems like it's like core to the VR experience is that you just turn your head and that's all there is to it, right? But if you have to hold the thing on your face, that breaks the immersion of virtual reality.
Do you think it'll break it as much as the pixels that'll be the size of hams when you're holding them 3 inches away
yeah,
from
that's
your
the
head?
other thing. It's like, this seems like the perfect kind of thing you'd want to have a Switch Pro already for, is a higher quality screen that actually can look good and pop on something like this.
Yeah, my main thought was just, I don't know what to think, because they announced a VR system with a press release and a few screenshots instead of a trailer. So I don't really know what sort of experiences to be expecting, or, what they'll look like visually, if it's going to be an eyesore or what. So yeah, it's a cool idea. Hopefully they come up with some fun stuff for it, and it's obviously a much lower, cheaper entry point than any other VR device. But I also imagine it'll be a little bit of like a you get what you pay for situation.
And it's for kids. Just like the rest of
Yeah.
Labo, it's not
Yeah.
going to be something that anyone who's above the age of 12 is going to be like, I need that. Like, it's meant for kids, again, which is fine. I just don't... I think some people are looking too much into what it may become, and I don't expect it to go anywhere beyond what we've seen.
Did they say anything about having the custom programming stuff for the VR kit? Because that would be... That's like the main thing that I could see being really cool about it, beyond just the initial like coolness of building your own VR device.
I'm sure it will.
And I wonder how robust that would be, because it seems like the other ones, the things you could do were pretty cool, but like the visual interface or the visuals that you could turn out of it were not necessarily very sophisticated. But that's something that's very important for VR. So like, you know, do they let you actually build really cool graphics that you can explore in VR? Because that would be fun.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think they'll go too crazy with it, but at the very least, it'll have some of what the original Labo did, where you can do a lot of neat programming with it to not necessarily do whatever you want, but to take some existing things and make cool stuff with it. So we'll see where it goes. I'd expect something like, you know, maybe, you know, the that Google project they did a few years back for VR with the 3D painting. I'd expect to see stuff like that as user-created content on there, where you can just make your own little world by pointing and placing objects everywhere, and I'd expect a lot of things like that. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't think it'll go super far, but I'm sure it'll be fun for those it's intended for.
So, did you guys have any other like big topics that you wanted to hit on for 2019, or are you ready to sort of transition to wrapping up?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot of it. I don't think there's really enough to know about how 2019 is really going to go yet. We've still got surprises to go. We've still got E3 coming up. We know they're not laying every single one of their cards out on the table. And even if they are, even if this is everything, this still looks like it's going to be a nice solid year for the Switch. It's going to continue the coasting, like you said, in 2018, if nothing else. But there's also some really good experiences, depending on what type of gamer you are. Like, I feel like each year may focus on a different type of person, because while I'm not super big into RPGs personally, a lot of people are. So this will be a big year for them, whereas maybe other people aren't as big into adventure games. So 2017 was better for me. But I think looking back on the past 2 years of it, I'm just glad Nintendo managed to actually come up with a cool, new, unique idea that wasn't so bizarre that it couldn't also be a good gaming system. And I loved the Wii U. I loved the Wii. There's a lot of things I liked about them, but I've gotten a lot more out of my Switch than I did out of either of those systems, and I think that's great.
Yeah, so I don't see 2019 as nearly as much of a coasting year, just because of, you know, the fact that they have enough regular releases. You know, like I said, close to monthly exclusives. I think that this will be the biggest year for Switch yet, even if they don't have, you know, like a Smash that's, you know, this ultra seller. Just sort of, a lot was made last year about them, you know, coming a little short of their 20 million goal for hardware sales, but they're not going to fall very short. It's going to be real close. The fiscal year wraps up in about 3 weeks, so it's going to be close. And so far, at least in this calendar year, Switch has outsold its 2018 numbers like every single week. And so, and that's, you know, even with the fact that they haven't really done much, you know, early in the year so far, but they're just riding on the momentum of that big holiday season and their evergreen titles and their strong marketing. So once they actually...
And that's actually saying something, because the first calendar quarter last year was pretty strong for them.
Yeah, it was above average. So once they actually start rolling out these big monthly titles, and once, you know, like Detective Pikachu hits the theaters, and Animal Crossing releases, and Fire Emblem releases... I think 20 million is actually very much an attainable goal in 2019, even if they came a little short in 2018. And I think in terms of software, you know, they might set some records for software sales for the year. So, like I said earlier, I think Switch is really starting to hit its stride, and it's going to be a really good year.
Yeah, we're at the point now where we can say for sure that third parties are sticking with the system. Year one was very much, like I said earlier, like them figuring out what they needed to do. Year two was them sort of starting to execute, and year three is they've really hit their stride. And so that's also really encouraging to see. I'm this is the first Nintendo system where the vast majority of games that I've bought are third-party games, not Nintendo-published games. And so for me, it's a really important sign going forward.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for our anniversary episode. Thank you guys for joining me.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for waiting for me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Lex was running a little late today, but we made it work. And Humulos, really glad we were able to have you on. We actually wanted to have him on for our Metroid episode a few weeks back. He's probably the biggest Metroid fan at Gamnesia, but then he came down with a case of the plague, so we had to push his debut appearance back a little bit.
Yep, I do have a lot of opinions there. But hey, I was happy to be able to talk about this because I also have a lot of opinions about the Switch in general, so this was good.
For sure. All right, thank you everybody for listening. Stay tuned for future episodes. We're putting them out. Well, we were doing about one every other week, but we've had so much news lately. We've been getting back to about weekly releases, so it kind of just depends on the flow of the news. And then, of course, we also have the Gamnesia After Dark podcast, where we just kind of talk about more broad, general topics. We cover games outside of Nintendo, and we also cover movies, TV shows, and just what we're doing in our free time. So if you ever want to just learn a little more about the Gamnesia staff, you can check that out. Releases are a little less regular, but we keep you up to date on the website about when they're coming out. Other than that, you can follow me on Twitter at Erimgard, ERIMGARD. Lex?
I am being a bad internet personality right now and taking a break from social media, so you can continue to find me on the Switched On podcast every once in a while.
Well, that's good for you, though. It may be a bad internet personality, but I'm sure it's great for your mental health. So
it is. Yeah, it's very good for the self-esteem.
And Humulos.
Just at Humulos on Twitter, but only follow me if you really like Digimon, because that's all I talk about.
Did you want to plug your YouTube channel at all?
Sure. I do. I have a bunch of Breath of the Wild videos mostly. I got some other content. If you want to check it out, youtube.com/Humulos. I got some stuff on there you might like. So yeah, hopefully you would find it funny. I hope you do.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining, and until next time, see you later.
Bye.
Cheers.
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 Bye.
Cheers.